Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Ought to Know webinar series. We've got lots of people registered this morning, so I'm going to go a little slowly before we kick off so we give people enough time to join. Thanks for being here. My name is Nicole Rogerson, and I'm the CEO of Autism Awareness Australia. I just want to say today, we absolutely must acknowledge the support from Leap In, who help us bring these webinar series to you. Leap In is Australia's leading NDIS plan manager, helping people with disability across Australia. They're certainly driven by people over profits, and they help people with disability and their families help navigate the NDIS and get to the most out of their plans. I think that probably sounds like something we all need. So thank you very much to Leap In for supporting this webinar series today. For those of you just joining, we have a monthly webinar series. This month, the focus is on schools and school-age kids. And shout out to all the educators that are joining us today, because I noticed quickly looking at the registrations of the people that are joining us, there are so many people from education departments, and shout out to all the teachers joining. It's just wonderful that this is not just something for parents, that educators are so interested in helping students with autism have a better time when they're at school. So I really appreciate you all joining. Okay, so my special guest today is Dr. Ramona Toscano, who is a clinical psychologist with expert in autism, anxiety, and mood disorders. She holds a Doctor of Clinical Psychology from Macquarie University, where her research was focused on assessing anxiety in autistic children and adults. I have known her for 9 million years, and she is a passionate and gorgeous clinician whose brain is as big as her heart. So I'm very, very happy to welcome Dr. Toscano to our webinar this morning. Ramona, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Nicole, and thank you for that introduction. Very, very happy to be here.
Not a million years. We're both very young, but, you know, a while. A while.
A little while.
Ramona, I wanted to kick off today it's a bit of a cross promotion for Autism Awareness Australia, in that just this week we launched our national parent and carer survey that we surveyed over 1,200 families across Australia. And in the school section, the parents of school-aged children, I want to say all the findings were pretty grim, but the schools section was particularly grim for me. And for families watching this, if you don't know what I'm talking about, the report is available on Autism Awareness's website. You can easily go down there and download it. But one of the findings that blew me away was that 87% of parents reported being worried about their child's mental health at school. This wasn't worried about their child's mental health. They're worried about the effects school is having on their child's mental health. And if you think about it, it's just mind-blowing. Why is school continue to be such a challenge for autistic students at all different ages?
It was very difficult results to look at, actually, Nick. And I would say the clients that I work with at the moment, the majority of them are actually struggling to stay at school. So, school refusal is big. There's a lot of challenges. And I think it's a multitude of things. It's not one particular thing that the students are struggling with. When we're looking at, autistic students in a school system, there's lots of things that are difficult from the social side of things. The friendships are difficult. The academics are hard. The processing of information is difficult. The sensory sensitivities are big. And then on top of that, we're going back home to potentially homework or more demands or activities. So they're not getting the downtime that we need. And a lot of the time, these students are also getting very, very, very misunderstood. So if I'm in a setting that's difficult for me to get through every single day, I feel misunderstood, I don't know how to navigate my environment, of course, I'm going to feel highly anxious, highly stressed. It's going to impact my mood. It's going to impact my self-esteem. I don't feel very good about myself. And then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and the cycle continues. And that's what I'm seeing a lot of at the moment. So those results, although they're very hard to see, they don't surprise me, sadly. And I think we're getting better at maybe listening to our children and listening to what they're saying, and they're potentially finding those people to tell. So we actually know that this is actually happening.
And it's almost like, it sounds ridiculous, but kids are going to be at school. You're going to be there for 12 to 13 years. We need this to work, right? How is it, are we getting better as a system, as a school system, as educators at looking and saying, why is this such a persistent problem that we're still not accommodating these students the way we know we need to?
I think there's a number of challenges, Nick. I think teachers, educators, they're definitely more aware of the changes that need to happen, but that doesn't mean that the resources are matching that. I'm often told, and I'm very aware that the training also doesn't, cover broadly these topics and the things that the teachers might need to be aware of in a classroom system setting. And then when you've got 20, 30 kids in a class and a few of them need help for lots of different reasons, but you don't have that extra pair of hands in there, it's actually challenging. So I think right now we're more aware of all the difficulties that are there, but the resources and all the things that need to happen are not quite there, that we're not matching that.
Because the problem I see with school refusal is I understand why a child might refuse to go to school, and that becomes a problem for both the child and the parent and different reasons. But what worries me about school refusal is if we leave that alone and we don't address that, doesn't that become life refusal? Like that's what worries me about children once they finish school.
Well, it certainly makes it harder. So, school is such an important place to make those social connections, friendships, relationships, learn a whole lot of skills. Unfortunately, what these students are getting is that I can't be in this system where lots of other people are kind of just getting through. And what does that mean to me moving forward in terms of, just in general, friendships and relationships outside of school once we finish year 12 are very hard. So when you're navigating that transition to potentially a workplace or just the adulthood, so when I don't even have that backup of having had that throughout my school years, then it's going to make that harder. The one thing I do want to highlight, children don't refuse to go to school for the sake of it. The children that don't go to school are the ones that actually can't make it to school for very, very valid reasons. The majority of children, the students that I work with, they want to be there. There's a lot of guilt about not being there. There's shame. They're very aware that it puts pressure on the family. The ones that are actually old enough to understand some of this and communicate that to me, that's what they want to be in school. They want to have the friends. And I'm speaking quite broadly here. It wouldn't be the same for everyone. But yeah, they're not going to school because they really can't make it. So, if it becomes life refusal, they're not going to have all those positive experiences growing up, like someone who has had a more successful experience at school.
So the whole point of our education system is that it is has agreed to educate students with a disability. So, we're enrolling children who have autism into schools and apparently eyes open and arms open. But is it just, I mean, again, we found when we asked parents in this survey, not just what were the challenges your child was having, but what are the things that you wish would change? What could you change? And one of the things really high on the list was the school understanding the accommodations that need to be made. Is that a way of getting around the school refusal part? Is if students want to go, they want to be successful, is it a case of we just don't have the accommodations right?
That's one of them. I think there's more to it than that. I think that it's very much a team effort, right? So you need the teacher, the support team, the parents, the the external providers that are all working together. I can definitely confirm that I have worked with many students successfully in reintegrating them back into a school system, where those accommodations were in place. So whether we had things like partial attendance plans to, bring us back to attending school more successfully, sensory spaces, sensory accommodations, whether it's in the classroom or outside. One big thing that I find is very helpful is having one or two key people in their life in that school system that they know they can go to no matter what. So if I'm having a hard day in the classroom, if I'm really struggling in the playground, there's that one person I can go to, and that key person can make such a big difference in that child's life or the student's life. So I think it's about working together and all these different parts of their child's life actually working together to make them more likely to be able to attend.
And if a school's not making those accommodations or a teacher's not making those accommodations, I had this story this week with a family who reached out and their 6-year-old has been suspended 3 times this year. It's only April. And he's 6, but sure. To me, that sounded like a school that doesn't want to make accommodations, that doesn't want to make that work. As a parent, how do you deal with that? Because there's the mum side of you that says, well, you have to sort my child out and you have to welcome my child and you should be more inclusive and you should be more accepting. But the reality is some schools don't want to do it.
No, and that's a tough one. Yeah. And then sometimes you'll have the teacher in year 1 was great and all these accommodations. The one in year 2 comes along and, very different teacher and very much down the behavioral path. And this is how it needs to be. And this is how I run my classroom. Some schools are definitely more open to making accommodations than others. I think the way I like to work with families is I'm very big on building relationships. So that first meeting that we have, whatever that might be, the support team, the principal, whoever that is, let's just get to know each other. These are the things that we need support with. What can you provide? How can we help you provide that if this resources are not there? So I'm very much about let's work together. But if I've had a few meetings, things are not changing, things are not shifting, child's getting suspended, ongoing bullying issues, whatever the reason, the situation might be, I do have that conversation with the family. Is this the school we want to be at? And I don't like having that conversation because it should be completely the other way around, where the accommodations are actually just happening. But, if it's happened once, twice, three times, this is probably not the right school for us, unfortunately. And then, fortunately, we have to back at square one and start again. Having said that, we've had situations where we've had multiple changes of schools and that still didn't,
Yeah.
help. So it's not easy.
Is there something that a family or an autistic student can do, say in the morning, that helps with school refusal? Is there kind of, a behavioral or a sensory plan that can be successfully started? I mean, it feels like the school refusal thing to say I can't go. It feels like giving up, how do we help these students more? Is there something in their routine that can help?
There's lots of things. We just really need to dig deep and figure out what is it that's actually not allowing the student to attend school. So if it is a friendship issue, you'll probably find that if we address that, the child is going to be more likely to go to school in the morning because they know they have the support. There's things like supporting with transitions, making the morning as calm as possible. For some children that are a little bit more active, it might be going for a run, jumping on the trampoline. For some children, it might be doing my homework in the morning to make sure that I'm ready for the day because I know that that's done. So it's very different for different students and for different reasons. But I think if I had to narrow it down a little bit, is making sure that any sensory sensitivities are accommodated for. So whether that is quiet music on the way to school, whether it's the uniform doesn't work for me, so I need to rethink what we're wearing, whether it's the bright light, whatever that might be. And having a solid plan as to how do we get to school. So for some students I work with, they like to get there early to give me time to settle in, and then I go in with everybody else. For other ones, cannot handle the chaos that is the morning before we start, before the bell goes, and I'd rather go in 5 minutes later. But then I want to have that person meeting me there that is going to help me go in. So I can't give you a quick one on this one, but I think supporting transitions, really figuring out what it is that's keeping the students from being able to attend, and then having a specific plan around that.
So one of the things that could be is that we found that 32% of parents reported that their child had experienced bullying. Now, if you overlay that bullying, which I can imagine any child who experiences that, school becomes a pretty unsafe place to be and unwelcoming. Is there something that we can do around bullying, and then overlaying that, the sort of social media side of it? And I'm loath to blame phones for everything, but surely that's got to be factored into this discussion.
And I think with the social media, the phones, all the devices, our kids, a lot of them are not ready to navigate the complexity of all that. It's too hard. I mean, we struggle as adults to navigate some of those friendship situations, or, someone's getting upset. I mean, the students I work with, I'm working with a lot of adolescents at the moment, and just knowing how to respond to texts and things like so the level of bullying is across the board. We get it on the phone, we get it when we're in the playground, we get excluded from things. It's very subtle, it's very sneaky. So it's very hard for our students to actually know how to navigate all of that. But then if we're looking at the younger years, I mean, bullying, it's not just about the autistic individual who will get bullied. It can be, for lots of different reasons, but we definitely know that our students experience it a lot more often. And I was actually looking at some research this week, and it was talking about them, all these, adolescents and adults who have not, very few of them have gone through school without some level of trauma related to bullying or social difficulties.
Which is just horrifying, horrifying concept. But I mean, again, it's being able to navigate those systems for those autistic children. It sort of seems like an overlay if the bullying is the problem. The other thing is we had really high percentage, like 70% of students, they said, struggled with peer relationships. 46% said they found it difficult finding and connecting to a peer group. Is that stuff that parents or educators can work on to help a child make that connection if it's not coming naturally?
Yes, and I think a lot of us would be struggling with that. So But things like buddy systems, I found it quite hard to get them off the ground in school settings, but they really work. So we sometimes we might just have a rotating system of maybe one, one or two peers that actually are just they actually enjoy bringing someone under their wing and actually introducing them to other peers. Having focus groups during lunch breaks. So whether it's a chess club or whether it's some specific activity that they do, it might be a history topic, something like that, that it's more structured than the open playground. So we're in a playground situation. It's very unstructured play, lots of downtime and free time, and that's hard to navigate. But if we have something with a focus, then that's more likely to help the autistic student get through that time of the school day. I think also finding those little groups of, it doesn't have to be the popular group, but as long as and I also say it's not about the quantity, but the quality. So I would definitely much rather have a group of 2 to 3 students that actually get along and can spend time together. It can be challenging though. And I think for parents, it's sitting with that anxiety that the students actually have to go and, work it out. And we're going to be there to pick up the pieces and support them along the way. But at the same time, there's only so much we can jump in and create, because that's going to the impact that has on self-esteem sometimes can be a little bit hard, because students are very aware that, this is actually coming very hard to me and it doesn't come naturally and I don't like that. So it's about having the right people at school to support that, having systems in place at school, like lunch groups, buddy systems, and I don't feel like we're doing that enough.
And that goes to a question about disclosing a diagnosis. So it's different. For some kids, it's going to be a little bit more obvious. For others, families and the student themselves might have sat on the fence about whether or not to disclose that they have an autism diagnosis. Do you sit on the fence there, or is it good in some cases or not good in others? Like, is it better for students at the school to understand that Johnny is different because Johnny is different and there's a reason why? Or does that label end up causing the trouble for the child in a different way?
I'm very guided by the student themselves, no matter how young or how old, really. Because if it's a student who's just not ready to share that information, then actually sharing the information is the most detrimental thing we could be doing, as opposed to another student who's very open and I'm, very happy to be who I am, and this is who I am, and I'm not apologetic in any way, or I don't want you to be, treating me any different. This is who I am. I'd want that student to have the freedom to be sharing that information, and the adults around them supporting them in whatever decision that they make. A lot of the time, it's timing to sort of readiness for actually sharing that information. It's quite personal. So for me, pros and cons to everything. I have had positive situations with sharing information. I've had some not so good ones, but I think if we do it at the right time, and just sharing it in little bite-sized pieces as the individual themselves is ready to, I think it would be hard for it not to be a positive experience, when we factored in all of these things.
And what about some of the back end work, for instance? Where do you sit in the world of sort of social skills in terms of, is there stuff that we can be doing and teaching in a positive way around social skills that might end up then going on to help the child when they're actually enrolled in school?
Do you mean before starting school?
Before starting school, or even during school, but it's an outside of school activity. Is that a worthwhile thing for parents to be thinking about?
Social skills groups. Yes, as long as they're targeted in the right way. So I think one thing we're struggling with a little bit now is this idea that, autistic people need to learn social skills. I mean, we all equally need to learn to work together. But if a conversation is very hard for me to have, then it would definitely help to have some skills around, how to introduce myself, how to introduce a conversation, what kind of, am I just jumping in and barging in and interrupting the conversation, or do I kind of sit back and listen to what are we talking about? How do I join? Do I have something to contribute? How do I exit a conversation? So that's just one example. There's lots of skills that definitely we could be teaching, and that would be very beneficial. As long as the message doesn't come across that this person is broken, can't, but rather we can refine it a little bit so that we make it more likely for me to actually have more positive interactions with other people.
So I guess that comes back to that relationship between the parent and the school as well, because regardless of whatever the child's age is, if all of the adults in the room get together to agree, these are the challenges, this is what Johnny does that is really difficult, these are the challenges that could come up, and then there's a plan to address them. I mean, there's probably lots of parents know that, children have individualized learning plans, and the family might get together with the school once a year to decide what that plan is. it's my experience that sometimes those plans then get put on a shelf and people forget them, and it doesn't become a project plan. It becomes the thing that we thought was relevant in February. What does a family do about that to make sure the school's being held accountable and the parents are being held accountable too, to be part of this team of people trying to make life better for the student?
Preparation is key with this one. So definitely as we're, for example, transition from primary to high school, as we're approaching high school, it's actually good to have those sit down meetings early and have a plan. These are the things that are likely to be challenging for me. These are the things that we do about them. One thing I struggle with those plans is there's a lot of things that are being put back on the child. The child's meant to do this, and that. And really what we want to be looking at more is what can we do? What are the systems in place? What are the accommodations? How can the teachers support? So I think the IOPs are a bit tricky. I think there's lots of more work that we need to do. I 100% agree with you, Nick. I've had some of them are like 5 pages long with all this information, beautiful tables, and they look fantastic, and no one looks at them. It's not a workable document. So, and then I've had other situations where, we kind of had a bit of a shortcut, but it was a 1-pager, but it had like a list of 5 bullet points that were right on the spot, and then it worked. So it doesn't need to look pretty. It's a workable document that needs to be reviewed, I would say, every 3 to 6 months at minimum. I don't think I've been successful in having it every 3 months, but every 6 I have. I'd like to do it sort of beginning of the year, halfway through at the very least, and then end of year in preparation for the following year. They need to happen. These meetings are not an optional thing. It's just, there's no way we can support students successfully in school unless we're sitting down and talking about these things.
Yeah, and one of the things that might change, one of the mums that just asked a question asked about, schools being a sensory nightmare. And, for her daughter at the moment, it's the school bell, which, you can imagine when that horn goes off various times of the day. But that might be a sensory problem for now that could be addressed. But schools are a sensory nightmare. There are children everywhere and they're not quiet. It's like, can the school be part of the plan that says, look, this is going to be really challenging for multiple reasons. How are we going to work on this? You can't just expect the child to get used to it over time. There has to be an activity plan, right?
There would be, and I wonder, and this is where we're looking at, is it a situation where we either go at certain times, so it's quieter, louder, like the morning is, getting ready for school, they're going in, everybody's just playing outside, it's noisy, it's very noisy, and then the rush to go into class, and so there's trigger points, I would say, that are even harder than maybe being in the classroom. So definitely having a bit of a plan, and that plan is going to look different for different children. So whether it's I just need to go in 10 minutes later, or I stay in the office with the librarian until the bell goes and then I can go transition quietly. It might, for some other students, it's about things that are actually hard for me, and I have a pass that gives me permission to leave the classroom whenever I need to. And the plan is I go to a allocated space, I have my downtime, I regulate, I have things in place there that might help me regulate, and then I'm ready to go back in. So the plans are going to look different for different people, but we definitely need to factor all those things in.
So somebody's got
It
asked
is a
us,
sensory
everybody.
nightmare.
Ramona, the next question I was about to ask you, I don't know whether I got it out before we died, but it was about aggression. So if we've got a student, this is again going back to my little 6-year-old this week that got suspended. He was showing aggression towards a teacher because he was in an environment out on the playground that was really difficult for him, and that was what resulted in the suspension. Now, I'm going to park whether or not a 6-year-old could hurt a teacher very much, but it's behaviour we've got to deal with, right? We can't have the aggression part of it. So how does from a parent's point of view, how does a parent manage that?
Yeah. And I think, look, a 6-year-old maybe not hurting a teacher, but I have definitely had situations where it was very dangerous. So those are the things we definitely need plans for. And we need a plan B and a plan C, and who can be involved and who needs to not be involved potentially. I think, again, I feel a bit repetitive, but we need to figure out why. Because if I know why that behavior is happening, then I can do something about it. So was it a particular subject that triggered it? Was it a particular friend? Or was it someone eating, I don't know, some lunch that was, the smell was too triggering? So if we know why that's happening, then we can have a specific plan as to, are there any things that we can prevent, or are there things that we can do to prevent that escalation from happening? What was going on for the child potentially before getting to school that morning? Is it about communication with the teacher? He's really prickly this morning, please just give him space. Is the academic load, the demands in the classroom too high? I have definitely had many kids over the last few years where For a whole term, the request is no demands whatsoever. Forget about writing, forget about reading. It's just about having the child back in school, loving school, being happy to be there, and then we'll slowly build it up again. I mean, we've had situations where we've had to evacuate a classroom because the child in the classroom was completely dysregulated, unsafe to themselves. And then it might be that parent gets called in, and we do sometimes the children respond better when it is a parent, because the threat of having, a grown-up teacher coming in might be a bit too scary. So there are things that we definitely need to discuss as a team. I think the unhelpful things would be, again, just the blaming the child. There's a reason why this child is engaging in this behavior. They're trying to communicate something. And in that moment, it's when the language just goes, any regulation that was, potentially something we were learning is not quite there, is obviously lost control. And we need a calm, patient approach with people that actually understand, that are going to help that child come up over that hump, back down to safe enough regulation, and then we go again. And when that plan is in place, we revisit that plan, what worked, what didn't work, what needs to change. Let's make sure it doesn't happen again, or at least not to that extent.
Yeah. And that's a really important point. It's really not about the schoolwork in the short term. It really just doesn't matter, right?
They're not going to go anyway. So
yeah, in actual fact, I would imagine it potentially, if you have a school refusal situation that goes on for some time, that's potentially going to have more of an impact on the long-term academics than anything in the short term, right?
correct. And look, I find that parents do understand when we get to that point where things are quite extreme. No one is really that interested in can they do their math and their English right now, because we can't even get them to school safely. And unless we look at the really foundational skills, we're not going to be able to get them learning. They're not in the right headspace to learn. So we really need to think about going to school safely, happily, and then we can build from there.
And that's parents also having to acknowledge that they shouldn't be anxious about that. It just doesn't matter. Students can catch up. And really, ultimately, we want them to be thriving at school.
And they will come, it'll come back. I mean, it's easy for us to say, you shouldn't be anxious about that because it'll happen. It's not easy, because what really happens is child is falling behind, anxiety, especially for the older students in high school. They're very aware they're falling behind. It's hard to catch up. Don't know how to do my homework. I'm part of a group project, have no idea what I need to do here. And then, HSC is getting closer, or year 10 exams, or whatever that might be. Anxiety goes up, my self-esteem goes down, and again, it starts again. So the earlier we intervene, the better. But sometimes these challenges become a little bit more obvious and more prominent in the high school years. So as soon as we start to see the initial signs of things are getting real hard, we need to sit down with the support team, have solid plans in place, and review those plans on a regular basis.
Okay, so we found another statistic in the survey that was, because we did this survey 10 years ago. So it was kind of interesting to do it 10 years apart and see what had changed and what hasn't. And one of the questions we asked about was where your child goes to school. And we saw that there was a double, it literally doubled from 4% to 8% of students being homeschooled. Look, people have different political views on it. Is that just sometimes where we have to revert to, or is that really letting the school system get away with saying this is Johnny and Johnny's just too hard? I don't like the idea of any child feeling like we can't get all the grown-ups together to make some kind of accommodation here.
This is more of a personal thing for me, but the way I like to work, if I've got a student in school who's struggling to go, I would want to make sure we've tried every single thing possible before we consider. So then the first step would be, let's talk to all the people involved, make sure we've got things in place that we can actually see whether we can get this child successfully going to school. If that fails, can we consider other schooling options for the older students? There's, different kind of mental health support schools, things like that. That's not working. Do we go to a partial sort of distance education type setting, potentially doing some subjects from home? So there's lots of different steps that I usually like to work through before we go, we're fully homeschooling. I have had situations where the family just, and they're right, like, our children don't fit the box. They don't fit the nice, pretty, this is how school looks. And it's harder. It depends on how willing the school is to work with us. So I've definitely had more and more students going down the homeschooling path. And for some, it's actually worked quite well. Like, I have to be honest, because the pressure is off, but we want to make sure that they're getting opportunities outside of what school would provide to make sure that they're not missing out. And as you say, that sort of the life refusal side of things. So whether they have a set social group that they attend on a regular basis, whether they're involved in part-time work. And I'm talking about the older students. With the younger ones, again, I want to make sure we've tried lots of different things before we go down to we're going home, because it is harder to get back to school once you have had some time at home doing school from home.
Yeah, I guess, and I'm showing my bias here also because, I'm the parent of an adult, but, I have a saying that I use a lot to death, which is, your child is actually an adult for many more years than they're a child. Like school seems forever, but actually it's not. So if we really want to make it successful and so students can thrive in that school environment. And look, I know some of this is a larger political conversation. Certainly the work we do at Autism Awareness is to work with education ministers around the country to remind them just how badly they do it. And of course there are examples of schools that do it really, really well. What do you do about that? Because I imagine that parents come to your practice and see you and say, Ramona, you know all the best schools in insert city here. I know you know the bad ones. I know you know the good ones. Just tell me where all the good ones are and I'll move to that place. Is there like, do we bribe you or is that, it's really not the answer, is it?
Not quite. And you know what, though, Nick, like there's lots of schools that actually do lots of things right, which is really nice. And I mean, when I said that, the homeschooling point and do we let the schools get away with it? Absolutely not. And I wouldn't be recommending that as a first option. But the ones that do it well, it's usually the ones that actually are willing to work with external providers or work as a team. So they might not have the magic wand of our school is just fabulous. There is, to be honest, I don't think I've come across one of those schools that is just everything is great, but they're the ones that are flexible. I think that that's the key word for me, that even though you might have the teachers that have been there for 20 years and we've always done it this way, well, guess what? We need to do a little bit different now because we've got someone who's a little bit different. So the ones that are open to working as a team, who are willing to change the way they do their practice and who are willing to, look at research and information and work with the child and the family, they're the ones that I love working with. And sometimes even the younger teachers, they might not have the, years of experience backing them up, but they're just open to just working in a different way. And there are a few, so I don't want it to all be negative. There are a few. There's a lot of hard things about being at school, but there's a few that when things just go well and we just, move from one year to the next and we have our little dips, but we know that the trajectory is up. So those are the, yeah,
And
four
is,
good
is
schools.
it kind of an indicator? I've always found this to be true. Is it a key indicator that if the principal's really welcoming and really on board, that leadership goes through to the rest of the team? Yeah.
Definitely. And I do say in those meetings, when you're working with someone who's not giving us what we want, we just go next level and we go one step higher until we find the person that's going to work for us. Sometimes it's also just being the teacher in the classroom. And I've got a good relationship with them. At the end of the day, they're doing the daily work,
Yeah.
more sort of the time with the child. But yes, 100%. I think the way the principal runs a school or the way the principal, sort of the principal's philosophy and how they view things has a lot of influence on the rest of the school for sure.
Yeah. And conflict isn't great. Like we don't, as much as an individual teacher, an individual principal might be problematic for time to time with parents, I don't know that conflict is really ever the answer because you can't sort of bully a situation. It's really got to be soft diplomacy. Is that what you call it?
Yeah, I think a lot of the work that I do, Nick, is actually helping parents go through these conversations. As a parent, you're going to be very emotional, very stressed, very anxious. Like it'll be unfair to expect you to be anything but. So I think that's where having a psychologist or an external provider come in to support you. I can actually remove myself from the emotional side because I have to, because that's my job, and I can actually advocate for the child. And really point out all the things that need to happen that are currently not happening, as well as, just acknowledge the things that are going well and can we do more of those. I personally, I'm not someone that will go in, using conflict because it's only going to get us so far. But equally, when things are, I think I saw someone sort of a couple of questions around discrimination and things like that. Some things need to be called out. And if something's not right, then we do what we need to do. And some families want to go down a more sort of lengthy process to actually get what's right. And I'll support the family in whatever they need, as long as it's reasonable and ethical and making sure the child at the heart of this is actually being supported.
Because the school years are long, right? I mean, that's the thing. When you pack them off to the first day of kinder, it's a big first day, but it's the first day of many
Many.
years that you have to navigate this system.
Yeah. So and I think the other successful situations I've had is the high school students where it's almost like year 7, year 8 is where we're actually laying the foundations. Let's establish these relationships with the right people. And just show them we're actually here willing to work with you. We're not here to point out all the things that you're doing wrong. And that relationship builds over time. By the time we get to year 10, I don't even need to go to that meeting anymore because the child is actually able, or some of them are able to advocate for themselves. And they're really good. It's really nice to see that progression. And then, the next student coming along is going to have this foundation laid for them by the previous student, which is the more of this we do and the more we work with these schools, I'm hoping that in a few years things will continue to look, well, these results are not quite promising, but I'm hoping that things will shift moving forward.
Yeah, and look, the results there are, you know, act as a reminder for us to be able to take to governments and say we're still not doing it well. You know, we recognise the problem, we're working on it, we're going in the right direction, but we need to fasten this up because it's just not appropriate to see the percentage of those children that are struggling at school. That's still just completely unacceptable.
Yeah, and I think the one thing I want to say is, like the majority of students I work with, they want to have friends and want to be in school.
Yeah.
So let's work on that because that's what they're telling us, and I want to listen to that.
Yeah, beautiful. Ramona, thank you for staying on extra. And I really seriously appreciate all the people who stayed on after our technical difficulties. For those who didn't, you'll certainly will be emailing this video out later. So you'll watch the blooper, which Marlene in my office will make go away, and it'll look like some seamless moment where we didn't stuff it up in the middle. But Ramona, thank you so much for joining us today. Really, it was very kind of you and generous of you to give us your time and your brain and your very important insights into how we can make school more successful for students.
Thanks, Nick, and thank you for all your hard work. Keep it going.
All right. See you, mate.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Sorry about the technical issues in the middle. Big shout out to Leap-In, who are our sponsor for today. Without them, we couldn't bring you these webinars, so we're incredibly grateful. Also, if you're watching this video, it's because you couldn't attend live today, which is fine. But if you want a link to the report that I referred to when speaking to Ramona, it's available both on our Autism Awareness website, but there's also a link to it in the YouTube notes below. Of course, this video will be available on our YouTube channel at some point in the coming days, should you want to share it as well, if you think it might be helpful for someone to look at it. So thanks again for joining our Ought to Know webinar series, and we hope to see you again next month. Thank you.